Hello, thank you so much for your interest in The Accidental Caregiver, a book about the challenges and triumphs of intimate family caregivers. I use the term intimate family caregivers to describe those caregivers that are in pretty intense caregiving situations with a loved one, a family member, a friend, and might be providing care in home when you live with the person. Perhaps it's in a care situation. They might be in a long-term care facility or nursing home, as they're sometimes called in different parts of the world, or even assisted living. So caregivers are found everywhere in all walks of life, and they can be any age. But I am particularly focused on those caregivers that are in a situation with someone who's very close to them and they're providing day in and day out caregiving. But regardless of your situation, I'm sure you'll find something of value in my book that I hope both inspires people that caregiving can be a positive experience, but also gives you some tools and tricks of the trade to make your daily life easier. What makes our life easier is different for every caregiver. Caregivers are as individual as you and I, but I hope through the various themes that I discuss throughout the book in a narrative that goes through the lives of approximately 9 different family caregivers, you'll see yourself in some of the stories. One of the caregivers I talk about is my mother. Mom looked after Dad for 21 years at home. My dad was diagnosed with MS when he was 43. And they had at the time 4 youngish children. I was the oldest and 18 at the time and just entering nursing school. My youngest sibling was 10. So you can imagine the challenges with a family with a pretty persistent neurologic condition. Dad had chronic progressive MS. So it is a relentless deterioration with periods of wellness. But over those 21 years, Dad deteriorated and was cared for at home until he died in 2001. So I'm definitely influenced by the experience my family had. I'm also a nurse and a nurse researcher, and my entire nursing career, spanning nearly 40 years this fall, was pretty much focused on community, home care, nursing education, and research focused on home care and family caregiving. So while I don't profess to be an expert in all aspects of family caregiving, I certainly know a lot about it. I've experienced it firsthand as well as secondhand, being a secondhand caregiver supporting my mom. My experience came just as I was finishing this book when my husband had a diagnosis that you can read about in the afterword of my book. I'm happy to say he's well and life is good, but there was a pretty intense few years while we were dealing with his health issue. So I'm going to read from you a chapter called Beat the Clock, because time affects all of us, but in particular when caregivers are pretty much focused on having to get things done by a certain amount of time, meet with home care and those kinds of things. Time affects caregivers differently. So caregivers talk about time quite often. If you listen and really hear what they're saying, you'll understand that they're often trying to beat the clock. Someone said to me, "I don't think it's reasonable to expect somebody to be on call giving full-time care 24 hours a day for 7 days a week and 20 hours a day." And that's what it was. And it wasn't so much for the nursing care and everything, but that for a lot of that time you're constantly in a case of hypervigilance, especially with the conditions many people are living with at home. The health of the person you're caring for goes up and down and up and down. Someone else said it's constant. And another said, "You just keep doing it, right? You just have to. You see a problem and you solve that problem and you move on to the next problem and you solve that problem." Caregivers' time pressures are greater than most would appreciate. And anytime I talk with caregivers, it doesn't take long for them to begin sharing the role that time plays in their life. Not only do they experience a loss of time for self, but everything they do seems to be constrained by time and that awareness of time at all times. Patricia, a caregiver for Vic and a former office administrator, described what her mornings were like. I go downstairs and I get breakfast ready. I take his pills from his blister pack. I put them on the placemat. I prepare cereal. He likes the same thing. I get his juice. I mix it with Metamucil, sometimes coffee. I feed the dog. Then I need to think, did I eat yet myself today? She said dressing is the same. It takes a lot of time. I find him standing with his hands out. He's talking to himself. He's trying to organize himself to do those things. He used to shower every day. Now I have to tell him to. Everything takes a long time now. And then I look down and I'm still in my house coat. It's a juggling act to get everything done in a day between the musts, like providing care to their loved one, and the shoulds, like doing laundry or vacuuming the floor. Olivia said, I have so much going on that sometimes I wander off. I told my care aide the other day, I think you're going to have two of us to look after. Then I realized I'm distracted. I've got too many things to do. I've got to do this, this, and this, and this, and then there's the other thing, and then I go, oh, I forgot this, and I forgot that. I've stood up 2 people for lunch. I've never done that in my life. Both times I was dealing with the government about the OAS and then with the CRA. They upset me so much, I came home and I thought, oh, I'll have a nice lunch, some soup, and then I realized I just stood somebody up who's waiting for me at a restaurant. The routines associated with caregiving, including respite times, become ingrained in caregivers' internal clocks. Carol and Tom were self-described clock watchers, especially on Wednesdays. Like many caregivers, the respite time wasn't necessarily used for pleasure, but rather to take care of errands such as banking, groceries, or paying bills. They recalled how long it took them to overcome the pressure related to their deep-rooted notion that they had to be home every Wednesday at 4 o'clock when the respite worker left. Tom added, it just allowed Carol and me to get out on a Wednesday afternoon. It was the advantage that one of us could be away and doing things while the other one would be here with Dad. But still, there are times when you just want to get out together, or maybe you need to be out to take care of business. And for us, it was those Wednesdays from noon until 4. That was our time to be out. And for a while, Carol said, while some of Max's elderly friends were still in good health, some very good friends would come over about 3 or 4 o'clock on the Wednesday. They'd come over for a cup of tea and a visit. So if we ran a little bit late while we were out, there was somebody here. Because sometimes it's really hard to always get back home on time, right? But, for about 1.5 years after Max died, if we went out on a Wednesdays, we were always home at 4 o'clock. And Tom went on, psychologically, you just have to be home by 4 o'clock. It became a joke between us. We'd be heading home from shopping and we'd look at each other. Oh yeah, we're on time. And this was still happening 1.5 years after Dad died. A pattern just gets ingrained. So you can see by these caregiver stories that time is something that is never taken for granted and pretty much dictates their lives. So you'll find stories like Tom and Carol and Olivia, my mom, scattered throughout the book as they tell their narrative. And I'm sure you picked up the term respite. That's something I talk about in one of my chapters. And care aides coming into the home. We deal with home care, and we talk about how you can talk better with your home care case manager to get what you need out of life. And there's even something for people who aren't caregivers where we talk about ideas where we can help people know what to say to better support caregivers. So I hope you'll take the opportunity to look for my book this fall, and I am always around to answer any questions. You can visit my website, KimberlyFraserAuthor.com, and reach out to me there. Thanks so much.